Hey, I'm Pops, and yes, I love the Taylor Sheridan shows. Yellowstone, 1883, 1923. Mayor of Kingstown just was fantastic. Tulsa King, and then Special Ops Lioness. I haven't really done any videos on just because of the timing of things, and now we're on episode 4, and I was like, so let's talk about this show. All right, Special Ops Lioness is another one of these interesting approaches by Taylor Sheridan to highlight something that we are supposed to buy into actually happens in the real world. This is one of those where I'm not 100% sold on the research and his sources. So I'm just going to go based on his reputation that is kind of how the show came into being, that we have special CIA operative women that immerse themselves in situations where they can be close to like the women that are next to terrorists, daughters, wives, whatever, therefore to get them close to their targets and they can take somebody out. Now, the episode starts with a failed operation run by Joe. Joe is Zoe Saldana, who everybody knows is Gamora, amongst other roles, obviously Avatar, that kind of thing. And that goes sideways. And they ultimately have to pull the trigger with a drone strike and just obliterates everything, including their asset, because she got caught. So they're going to recruit a new one, right? So we have this backstory that sets all this up. Her name is Cruz. And I will say this before I get too far and forget, their acting is not the problem. So to be perfectly clear with these two ladies, they do a great job carrying the show. Cruz is fantastic. Takes some getting used to. But I will admit, because of how they dish out the physical elements of the show, it's delivered in a pretty good way. What's strange, especially the first couple episodes, is I don't quite totally feel immersed in their world. They set up this great team around Joe, actors that we already recognize from other shows that have Taylor Sheridan's name on them. For instance, James Jordan, who we know from Mayor of Kingstown, LaMonica Garrett, who is this incredible actor from 1883. So everybody, we feel very comfortable in this world. But then we stop spinning our wheels there. Like we get this little backstory on James Gordon's character, Two Cups, and their camaraderie, and then welcoming in Cruz and training her and whatever. And then we like have this whole start and stop with these first few episodes. And then you have sort of like the groundwork and the framework of every other element of the story. So Joe's story, because her daughter doesn't know she's a CIA op, right? I think she thinks she's a translator. So they spend all this time with Joe's husband, Neil, who is a pediatric oncologist. And you end up with these little side trails about parenting and marriage and all that. And then you have like another CIA official played by Nicole Kidman. She has a husband as well. So you have a sort of like side road through there. And it's like this show, unlike the other Taylor Sheridan shows, doesn't quite work. Like it just seems like the pacing is completely out of whack. They have great moments, they have great lines, they have all these great things working for them, and then they can't sort of like get out of their own way. Like we get through episode 1, we're very attached to everything. It's like, well, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. We get these great quotes, great moments. Marines, how kick butt they are. We're in it, right? Episode 2 comes along. We have a lot more about the training and what she's gone through and how she can handle everything. And then they have like this, where's her place going to be and everything. And then we don't quite understand really what, Nicole Kidman's character is, but we get it. And then we get to episode 3 and things got kind of wonky, right? Because out of the blue, they let like all of Joe's team be taken away, like just abruptly. They're going to go on a mission. It's like at the border. It involves like death and dismay and shooting. It should be in the news. And the character has a great line, by the way, because they bought into this character named Kyle. We don't know who Kyle is. We don't really care who Kyle is because he's not part of our main group. And he's like, this crap happens every day. No one cares. This administration doesn't even care about a border, But I'm like, okay, what are we doing? Because we're saying a lot of stuff. And I'm actually intrigued by some of the stuff, but it's not fitting in the grand scheme of everything. Because the point of the show was you need a lioness to go and take out this threat who we don't really know anything about. There's set up, and then there's nothing. And it's been like radio silence on what are we actually trying to accomplish. It's only about Cruz and this daughter in this teenage circle of uber wealthy Islamic Arabic people, and that's what we know, right? And then even though the story is fine, it's like I don't get it. Like I don't know. Then we get to episode 4. And I want to run through a little bit of episode 4 because the pacing gets totally crazy with episode 4. We have a brief recap. Let me get my graphic up here because I had to make sure I could get this off the app properly so we could kind of walk through the episode a little bit. The recap is fine, and they end up on a little beach, and it's just and we've gone through who she is, and she's with this girl and whatever. And by the way, Cruz is a fine lady girl. We just refuse to have any women that have boobs, by the way. Sorry, that's a male in me talking. It's like they just refuse to have anybody who's like really, really hot. It's just not. These guys are these robust, ripped men, whatever. And even like the ones that are in like their 30s and whatever. It's like these ladies are pretty. Yeah. So we end up with this whole backstory because she's like, she doesn't want to get married, and this is what's happening. And Joe's like in the middle of trying to run this op, and there's all this kind of stuff's what's happening. It's just the clock just keeps running with stuff, and it's all just sort of like not exactly moving the story along. You don't quite know if she's going to get, caught or not, found out or not. And this is the hearing of as you can see on screen, of this crazy operation that goes sideways. And we end up with these shots of Nicole Kidman. Now, I want to say this. I'm sorry. Nicole Kidman at times is a pretty lady. But in this show, there's times where she is also like, she is ugly. She looks wrong. Like her makeup's not right, or she's had too much work done. Like this is probably the weakest of the Taylor Sheridan shows because it is so inconsistent. Pacing's wrong. The editing's wrong. Makeup and shots are wrong. It's like we get up with Michael Kelly, and then he's like not on screen again. Like he's just here he is, and he's gone again. I'm like, he carried House of Cards. He is the backbone of why that show was so good at times. And we just keep cutting and dancing around these different elements because we end up having we stop the show. So the whole show stops because the teenage daughter is with this girl and they get into this car accident, right? Typical cliche, girl's not paying attention, T-bone, people are not doing well. So we got to stop the entire show to have this sequence. Okay. Now I do want to make sure I go backwards because there was a quick setup to this. Let's see. This is when she walks in. Yeah, I think it was back here, right? She goes home. When did it happen? Anyway, so the daughter, Joe goes home. I think it was here. And the daughter is making out with some dude on the couch. And then there's like this weird, awkward conversation about, what the rules are. And it's over the shirt, and it's okay with them because they're not going to. I'm like, this is some of the worst parenting elements you can possibly imagine, and it's done on this fabrication of being these hands-off parents. Like she's gone all the way, all the time. He's like this addicted oncologist surgeon guy who's completely disconnected the fact that they're even making out. It's like it's just this. They're awful bad parents. There's a comment very early on, I think it's episode 1, about being like in an open marriage, about like, well, I just did something so I could feel something. It's just like it's this, unlike his other shows, and I'm not going to totally like, list off some, but it's like you always felt kind of grounded in a character that you would root for, or a character that was morally complicated or faulted, but you could want to see them succeed. You want to see them grow and do well. I'm not cheering for Joe or Neil. I'm not cheering. I don't know who I'm cheering for. So I'm not even sure I'm cheering for Cruz at this point. Like she's okay. She's the most interesting character on screen, but we take a side road of the whole show because of this scene. I got to play the sound. This is going to be tricky to get through this scene. It's going to be a really long review because I got to get to this. Okay. So I've given you advice about, altering the course of your life, two things: cars and sex, right? If you don't pay attention in cars, teenage people die because they're in cars, they're not paying attention, they get killed. Her friend did get killed. Okay. By the way, they're pointing out the other one of the other ones that's really, really important that's not mentioned is finances and bankruptcy and credit cards. But let's set that aside for now. Okay. So the entire point of this is that that's what happened. And then he starts again because she's 14 years old. The fooling around that she was doing in the earlier scene is not the only fooling around that she's obviously been doing because she's pregnant. And he's basically giving her the moral conundrum of, if you're pregnant, you go through trauma, this can happen. You're going to have surgery, so you have to have anesthesia, so this can happen. You're going through this entire sort of like science reality of what has happened because you put yourself in this predicament. Okay. And then it's this incredibly deep, like, I'm sad that I have to have you learn these things the hard way. The consequences of your actions are manifesting. Like, we didn't want you to have sex because now you're going to be in this predicament. And you're like, holy cow. This is a very pro life, very religious stance of part of the reason that we didn't want you and we wanted to have stricter rules about making out earlier and getting yourself in the situation is because there are massive consequences to this. So now you're in a mess because now not only do you have to have the surgery and all of this, you have to live with the consequences of, do you try to carry this child to term? What will be the ramifications of that? Or do you allow the doctors to do what they've been discussing? Because the doctors are like willy nilly, like, oh, I just give her this, and this is what's going to take care of it. And you're like, holy cow, we're just so flippant with how they talk about things, by the way. But it all becomes this very powerful message. Like, it's just this really, really strong and powerful message about everything. I just thought this was, first off, I'm enjoying it, but it radically stops the show. This whole storyline is radically out of place. They're trying to keep it grounded as though, even though you're a CIA op, you can have a family and you can do these things. And even though you're this pediatric oncologist married to that CIA op, you can have this. Reality is, um, and we get to this a little bit later on. It's like it. It's just too much. Like, who's making sacrifices for the kids first? Nobody. So now you end up with problems. It's like, why does anyone surprised? Well, then we do typical Hollywood stuff because the girls are getting ready and it's literally like Megan the Stallion nonsense music. Like, it's so vulgar and terrible. I hated this sequence. This was unbearable to watch, just because, not because of what's happening on screen, because they choose to do these songs that they feel represent the time or represent female empowerment or something. Because everything about this show is pro woman. It's all woman, woman, hear me roar, whatever. It's like, I don't care about these bees. They don't like me because I'm pretty as F. And just the other day, I heard a host say, matter of fact, what could a host say? Like, okay, listen, why is any of that female empowerment? I don't want to hear, there is nothing interesting, appealing about all of that culture. Just, sorry, Hollywood. Don't want to let you know. It doesn't elevate these characters in the slightest. So then we end up with the operation. Cruz is going to go on this journey because, again, Cruz is the driver of the entire show. They're going on this adventure with the other girls. They're going to this remote place, so they're scurrying around trying to keep her within arm's reach to protect her in case it goes sideways. And now she's here. Well, they have to end up, Joe has to end up going in because for reasons, doesn't matter. Okay. And there's like, she's getting hit on or whatever. But then she gets the phone call about the daughter. Right. Here's the dancing with the other girl. And then Joe, oh, sorry, I went too far. Yeah, this thing it jumps ahead like in too many seconds. Anyway, she gets this phone call about her daughter. And she's like devastated and emotional about it. And she has this comment, which I wrote down to make sure I got it right. But it's like, we're sacrificing our kids for our careers, right? Because Neil told Joe, it's like, this is a problem that's too big to be mad. Like, this is, the surgery, the car accident, this baby, the pregnancy. And then it's like a comment about, because we're sacrificing kids for, I'm like, yeah, you were bad parents. And now it's like, you guys have consequences now because you've allowed this to get into a complete mess. Right. So the episode is fine. It basically results with her getting drugged, and the team has to go save her from stupid, like, sexual assault guy. He's just a skeezy kind of guy. And you have lecture from woman boss to woman boss and drama. And that's the episode. But the show is full of way too much woman boss, way too much lecturing, way too much just being on the cell phones, just way too much. And the exposition is so weak. Cruz will just say something, well, who are those people? And just the other character will just start giving the audience all of this information, and instead of allowing it to be more natural. This show feels so much more forced than his other shows, right? And then I have to put that on the wall next to really great moments. Like, Joe has a great line about, I weep for this next generation, and she's talking it within the context of why, right? Joe is talking about to Cruz, like, there's bogeys, bandits, and marks in this world and nothing else. Like, that's a really good line, and there's some good depth in there, right? But Nicole Kidman doesn't look good all the time. Zoe doesn't look good. There's time for Zoe. I don't know what the makeup is around her mouth, but these lines right here are deepening, and it's not quite done right. So she looks bad for her age, even. But the whole show is just so start and stop, and then this weird pro-life message thing in the middle, and like, what are we? This show is a lot. That's what I'm going to say. I don't even say I dislike it. It's a lot, and it's definitely not the typical Taylor Sheridan stuff. And we have like halfway a season to go. I know a lot of times his shows are like that, where it takes a while. They set up a whole bunch of stuff very wide, and then it just sort of like races towards something. But right now, you got a whole lot, and it's much more scattered and in disarray and full of things that are very subpar by his standards. So that's my take on the show. I don't know if you guys are watching it or not, if I turned you off or not. I don't know. I didn't mean to exactly, because I do like the show. It's better than most shows, but it's sort of like still very odd and disconjointed and not as consistent as I would like. But anyway, that's my take on it. Catching us up on that. So thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Pops.
My favorite quality about Pops is that he's incredibly honest. At least you always know where you stand with Pops. So I like that about him. He's not passive aggressive. He's not sneaky that way. He'll give it to you straight down both barrels.
Yeah. Right?